As to protests in the country, but let's come back to business. Cost of energy. The Kenya Association of Manufacturers now say that private sector might have to generate its own power for commercial and industrial use owing to the high cost of power. Speaking while appearing before the Departmental Committee on Energy, KAM and the Kenya Private Sector Alliance, KPLC, say that policies in the country are more favorable to generators than consumers of power. Jasmine Murani with the details.
Member Jen Regira, who is here with us as a
in a joint appearance before the National Assembly Committee on Energy, the Kenya Association of Manufacturers and the Kenya Private Sector Alliance have called on the government to act decisively in regard to the cost of power. The private sector says that the government is pushing investors out of the country, courtesy of the high volatility in power pricing. This has led the private sector to rethink its acquisition of power from the government, saying it might have to explore ways of generating its own power for commercial use.
It's becoming cheaper to generate our own power as investors, as an industry, than buying from Kenya Power. Not because Kenya Power doesn't have capacity, but because they can't deliver power from wherever it's generated to point of use. And so we ask ourselves whether then industry should be able to start generating their own power because it works out cheaper. And indeed, there are some industries that are already generating power.
The second largest supplier of electricity are off-grid companies who are providing solar home systems that are being powered and supplied remotely without any grid connection. As has been said, industries are going off the grid because it is more efficient to generate and consume your own power on site than it is to buy from the utility. The cost of generation, regardless of where you're generating it from, is known. Where we have a huge gap is in the transmission to distribution.
The private sector has also alluded to a conflict of interest in legislation and administration of power production, pointing to the alleged involvement of government officials in the business of generating power through ownership of IPPs.
When a regulator sits down, like in Kenya Power, and this is supposed to be in government, and then the same regulator becomes the generator. I'm trying to imagine in some of, for instance, the thermal plants that are existing in Kenya, where a civil servant becomes a player, whereas this is supposed to be the regulator. So what happens is they eat in two mouths. One mouth is making a decision as a civil servant, the other mouth is receiving, on the other hand, as a business person who is a shareholder in a power. And tell me, at what point will this cost ever come down when such a situation is in Kenya? It's all over. This very parliament has got very able research team. I know it has. Whether someone has registered a company in what we call tax havens like Mauritius, Bahamas, wherever, I believe we don't have better brains in Kenya than they are in parliament. I therefore wouldn't want to, and I'm again in this field, and it is a very small field. You don't want a bullet in my head.
The private sector further wants the government to streamline operations at Kenya Power to cut on system losses. The private sector has also recommended that entities such as NSSF and local pension funds begin investing in the power sector to curb the use of dollar-denominated PPAs by foreign and local investors. Jasmine Murani for KTN News.
Now touching on health, more than 15,000 residents of Mboni East